This week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast is brought to you by the patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast. This amazing group of individuals contribute financially to the Rural Woman Podcast to ensure the stories of women in agriculture hit your earbuds each and every week. Want to join them in supporting the stories of women in agriculture while getting access to extended episodes, patron-only episodes, and other great perks? Head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more about how you can become a patron through Patreon. Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman Podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman Podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. Today you'll meet Rachel Yaley. Rachel has been married to her husband, Steve, for 7.5 years, and they have 2 children, Maddie and Hayden. They grow corn and soybeans along with raising beef cattle and sheep on their farm in southeast Iowa. When she isn't helping her crop insurance clients or her husband on the farm, you can find her pouring candles, baking, gardening, and chasing kids. I am so excited for you to meet Rachel this week. We had a great conversation about her farm and growing the farm and nurturing the relationships with her crop insurance clients. Also had an extended conversation after we stopped recording the main episode that I think is a super important one to hear. Our patrons are going to get a special treat and hear that extended conversation. To give you a little bit of background, this conversation stemmed from a question that I asked Rachel during the main episode that we've taken out. And we're going to talk about why and that question itself. So if you're interested in hearing the extended conversation that I had with Rachel, head on over to Patreon and join us at our Barn Brew Buddy tier to hear this extended episode, as well as all of the other extended episodes and my patron-only podcast. Maybe you can relate. While we're on the topic of Patreon, I want to welcome our newest member, Ayla C, over on Patreon. She is joining us in supporting the stories of women in agriculture to be heard through the Rural Woman Podcast. So if you want to support the show as well as get all of these extras, head on over to patreon.com/the Rural Woman Podcast or the link in today's show notes. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's episode with Rachel. Rachel, welcome to the Rural Woman Podcast. How are you today?
I'm great, Caitlin. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am excited to share your story and to get to know you a bit better and to dive into all of the interesting things I've found out about you. And what you're going to share with us. So for the listeners who are unfamiliar with you, Rachel, tell us who you are, where you're from, and how you got your start in agriculture.
I'm Rachel Yaley. I'm from southeast Iowa, a little town called Mount Pleasant. And my husband and I got our start in agriculture. We both have ag connections, but didn't grow up like farming. And we decided it was the way we wanted to raise our kids. And just absolutely love this life. So we just went with it.
So what was your previous background? What was your relation to agriculture growing up?
So growing up, my dad was a farm manager for like absentee owners. That was my tie to agriculture, but I wasn't an FFA kid. I wasn't a 4-H kid. I didn't do, any of the fair things or any livestock shows, anything like that. I just literally, my dad managed farms. I was exposed that way. And I had going to college and did not picture myself being involved in ag. I was actually a pre-pharmacy major. So the complete opposite direction. And then I met my husband, and him and his brother had just started getting some cattle and row cropping. And so I'm like, all right, well, yeah, this is probably the direction we're going to go if I'm going to. And it's worked out. We just went with it, and it's been great so far.
So going to school for pre-pharmacy, obviously, this probably wasn't on your bingo card back then of what you were going to grow up to be when you grew up. So tell us about how, you moved into where you are now and how you, I guess, acquired your farm now.
So my family, actually, my dad took a position in this area. So that's how we relocated to here. And I had switched from pre-pharmacy to business administration for my major. You do that in one chem class, and it just kind of throws the whole thing for a loop. So I went with business, and I started out in insurance. And so I do start out with like farm, home, auto, life, health, just your regular insurances. And then I started working with crop insurance. So working with crop insurance, I was exposed to farmers and got to see the ins and outs and day-to-days of their operations. And at the same time, my husband and I had purchased our acreage, and we did that through the USDA. We just went through that whole program, which is a process, but it's definitely worth it if you can take that route, and because you learn so much along the way. And we bought our first we bought cow calf pairs, and then we were row cropping corn and soybeans, and we've just grown a little bit each year. And then a couple of years ago, we added sheep. I think that was more, I don't know if it was for me or for the kids, but I finally got him talked into it. So we added some sheep, and I don't know, it's just it's diversified, but it's fun. The kids are getting exposed to it, which is exactly what we wanted. And it's just a way of life that we're just really passionate about.
That is so neat. And looking back now, it probably feels like it didn't take that long to get where you are in the grand scheme of things. It was a slow grow, but now where you are and what you're doing, like considering, think about when you were a college kid and thinking about what kind of job you wanted. It's incredible for that growth to happen.
Yes, especially when something like this wasn't even on my radar. I didn't even want to get married. And that just kind of, everything, the one upstairs knows what he's doing, and everything just fell into place. And like I said, I wouldn't want to raise our kids any other way. And they enjoy it. We enjoy it. And
right.
It's just great.
So tell me the sheep story then. How did you acquire these sheep, and why did you choose sheep over, I guess, maybe a different four-legged animal?
So my his best friend, who's actually was best man in our wedding, they have sheep, and he's had them for like a really long time. And finally, my husband and I talked about it, and he's like, yeah, if you want to, we can get some. Well, he had some ewe lambs that were available. So we purchased just 10 ewe lambs in summer of 2022. So we lambed spring of 23. And then from there, we ended up with 7 more ewes out of that. So we kept those back and then just rebred. So we're really just in the beginning stages of it, but it came about more than anything because I've always been interested in the direct to consumer market for meat. And we've had, we always have people ask us, do you have do you have any beef available? Yeah. And then everybody's like, lamb? I don't even know anything about lamb. And so then we started marketing it that way. And that was kind of my focus from the beginning. I'm like, okay, if we're going to do this, I want to try to get consumers exposed to it, that it is a good quality meat, just like beef or pork or anything else. And so that is my goal for this year, is to grow that a little more and get the word out there that there is, other good cuts of meat out there available for people too locally.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about your off-farm job, about the crop insurance now, the sales. So, you've kind of gotten exposed before, diving into it yourself as a farmer. Talk to me about the experience of selling crop insurance, maybe in the beginning stages when you weren't maybe as well versed now in agriculture as you are today.
Thank goodness we have great business developers that work within the company that we write for, because I started out with a different company and I just learned first you have to learn the product. I didn't even know crop insurance existed until I started in insurance. And so then I had to learn everything about it. And that was in 2014. So I'm not going to call myself an expert. There's people that have been in this industry a lot longer than I have, and you learn something new every single day and day with it. But just going out and talking to farmers and asking them about their operation can be intimidating on its own, especially as a female walking onto somebody's property and saying, hey, what are you doing with this or what? Because as farmers, we're not always very open to want to divulge information about our operation. And there's several facets and reasons why we don't want to do that. We don't have to get into that, but it's just learning to build that trust and that relationship over time. And then it was an unfortunate circumstance in 2018. A mentor of mine passed away unexpectedly, and he did a lot of crop insurance and had a lot of crop clients. And I was the only one in our office at the time, that had a crop insurance license. And so it's like, here you go. And so after that, it was just full bore, dive in, learn it, really get to know it, know the clients. And I've really learned that it goes back to that trust. Like, I had to prove, it was hard, but I had to prove to them that, yeah, I knew what I was doing. I can help you. I can be a resource to you. We can, you look at things not only financially, but just, you want the revenue protection, you want your yield protection, but also having an operation on our own and knowing that we have, we purchase we purchase that product to protect our operation. And I want to do everything I can for my clients to protect them and put them in a good position. Last thing I want them to do is be in a negative position and have that downfall at the end of the year.
Well, I think you said something really important, and it's the trust building factor that's in, honestly, any industry. But when we're talking about crop insurance, and that is a big expense for farmers every single year, and to put your trust in somebody that they can, that they know what you need, basically. I think another big, maybe trust piece of this is, as account managers for people on farms, you are there. And sometimes I feel like in our industry, we are kind of guilty of, once we find that person that we trust, the oversharing piece, where the crop insurance agent also becomes, your coffee buddy, and also becomes maybe a little bit of your counselor or any of these things, right? Like, you have that relationship built with them. I'm curious, looking into the next growing season, what is the feel that you're getting from the farmers in your area? Are they excited? Are they stressed? What's kind of the overall thought that's going for the next season?
Prices are definitely a stress factor right now. This corn is, I should know this off the top of my head, like low 4, and beans, I believe they set the price at like $11.55. So we're down from what we were last year. So going in, and right now we've got till March 15th is our sales closing date. So we're pushing through that window of being able to, bump up that revenue protection, bump up that yield protection if we need to, because then if there is, if anything, one that's even worse, at least they've got that protection, that little bit of a cushion to help them through it. But it's just being able to talk to them about it. And like I said, I feel it every single day, knowing, we're buying inputs or purchasing our inputs for the 2024.
And then looking at how that's going to look down the road with this fall, with when we harvest, are we going to be okay? And I said before, I want to make sure that they're okay with that and they know that that's what I'm here for. And with the federal crop insurance program, the prices are the same no matter what company you go to. So you are really selling yourself and basing your service on the trust that you can build with them. Because if they trust you and they know you're doing a good job for them, you're not giving them a reason to go somewhere else to get the exact same thing with somebody that they don't know. And it's evolving every year, just building that relationship and making sure you listen and understand their concerns and needs as you're going into especially as we're going into the 2024 growing season.
For sure. I think, I'm thinking of you guys as first generation farmers and the position that you're in, selling crop insurance. What a great position you're in to learn from your peers and the folks around you in your community. You have like one-on-one access with these people that I'm sure they've been able to help you out along the way as you've been helping them with their crop insurance.
Yeah, having those resources that way has been very, very beneficial. Having that relationship, because like you said, that can go the opposite direction too. You've got people, my husband and I were just talking about this when we bought our operation or when we started our operation. And I mean, we really didn't know what we were doing. Like, okay, we purchase the property, you purchase livestock, and it's all about based on cash flows and setting everything up. But looking back, you go, wow, if we had somebody just said, hey, maybe just tweak and do this a little bit differently. But now looking back at that, it helps us going forward. And it also helps, I'm more comfortable asking somebody something, saying, what do you think about this? Like if you were in this position or if you had this situation going on your operation, how do you think you would approach that? And having those outside perspectives, especially a lot of my clients they're that older generation of 60s and up, which is when your average young farmer is in their 40s, you've got that age gap, but it's a good age gap because they've been through a lot of different things. And so you can get some really good perspective. It might be scary, some of the things they tell you and you hear, but it's good perspective to be able to look at.
You can help support the stories of women in agriculture to be shared through the Rural Woman podcast on Patreon. What is Patreon? It's a membership-based platform that helps fund and support creators like me to create and produce content like this that you all love. New to the Rural Woman podcast Patreon is ad-free listening and patron-only bonus content and exclusive episodes. Learn more and join the patron gang today at patreon.com/The Rural Woman Podcast. I want to go back with you to when you guys were first starting your farm and to where you are today. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you have faced in growing your operation?
I think everybody probably faces the challenge of markets and how to, utilize the markets to your advantage. And I mean, I don't like the word gamble, but a lot of times it is a big gamble and a risk you take with how you just have to make sure you're knowing your bottom lines on everything and where you stand, and that helps you project that risk in other places. And we've also, when we just started with, what we had for acres and the cattle. And then we've just diversified in different directions as we could, not like a whole bunch at once or whatever, but just as we could add little things along the way we have, and just having that diversification has made a big difference and helps. Like we destroy seed corn for a company that grows seed corn in our area. So that was one way we kind of pivoted a few years ago. We had the opportunity to step into that. And so my husband had the machine, and he'll go around and destroy the male rows for the seed corn. And then a couple of years ago, we added a truck, a semi. So we've done some custom hauling for people and added that. And it's just, I don't know how to say it. It's just adding those different things along the way. That's when, you don't have you're growing crops in the spring, and then you have your spraying. We have to spray. Okay. So, come to find out, there's a pretty good need in the area for people that are wanting custom application done. Okay. Dabble in that a little bit. And it's just a diversification. Like I can't stress the diversification enough, that if you're able to do it and pivot and add things and it works for you, go for it.
And I think that can be said on the opposite way too, pivot and diversify. And for the things that maybe don't work.
Yeah. Take those back off your plate. Yeah. Take them out. And it's all, a lot of industries I feel are trial and error, and farming and agriculture is definitely right in that trial and error.
Right. It is a yearly seasonal trial and error, because there's so many things outside of your control that.
Yep. And there's so many variables. Like you can't, you literally cannot control anything. And that's why you have to learn to pivot and be okay with pivoting.
Absolutely. So I want to flip that question. We talked about what the trials and tribulations are of growing the operation, but what are some of the things that you are the most proud of in your operation?
We actually work surprisingly well together. Like my husband and I work really, really well together, side by side. Has it been an easy road getting there? Nope. I'm not gonna even act like it's been easy, but it's just, you learn it. He went from, we both basically were separate, got married, and then you have this parallel where and I've had to learn to be okay with him. A lot of times he'll be gone before the kids and I are up at 6 o'clock in the morning getting ready for school, and not home until they're in bed. And I've had to learn to adapt and be okay with that. And it's not always the easiest thing sometimes, but at the same time, he's learned to adapt that, okay, I do have business meetings, or I have to meet with clients if I can't take the kids. But given our profession and our industry, he can take, a lot of times if he needs to take the kids in the tractor, he can. If he needs to go check, like this weekend, I had something going on, and he's like, okay, we're going to go check cows. And so he took them because we're calving, and he went down and they were looking for new calves. And it was one of those things that was pretty easy to transition in to do that. Yeah, I would say just us being able to work side by side together. And he trusts me enough that he can put me into, there was 2 falls ago, we were short and he needed somebody to run a piece of equipment. I never ran the tractor, never ran that piece of equipment. And he literally is like, okay, go get in it. He was on the phone. I have never ran GPS ever in my life. And he just walked me through everything. And we just we work really well that way, especially if it's just over the phone. We found it's that trust with each other, and okay, you're gonna do it. It needs done, and we'll figure it out along the way. If anything happens, stop. Just stop.
Absolutely. That's the instruction that I get too. If you hear something funny or if something is going wrong, just absolutely stop.
Yeah, just absolutely stop.
It's my preference too. I would rather just stop than try my mechanical skills to fix anything.
Right. Exactly. So. Exactly. Yep.
Although I can replace a harrow like nobody's business if that breaks in the field now. So.
Awesome. That is good. I wish I could say that.
Yeah. I am not patient either. I'd rather stop, but I'm not patient. So if I'm going to stop, I would like you to come right away so I can keep going. But so then that's when you learn to be resourceful.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And thankfully I haven't had been in that situation where I've had to okay, I gotta wait for him to get here to fix something or to bring parts. But I'm a really, really good parts runner. I will say I can
Love
I
me a
can go
good
get
parts
parts
run.
like nobody's business. Yeah.
Exactly. The parts run, there's a coffee store right beside the parts store. So I'm always game to go into
Yeah,
town for
me too.
that.
Yeah. And it's always funny when you go in and he'll be like, okay, I need a bolt this size. And I always thank God for FaceTime because I'll call him and I'll be like, is this the right one before I'm pretty sure it is, but just double check. He's like, yep, that's it. Or no, you need something different. But I'd rather ask than come back and have to go back again when they're already down.
Yeah, exactly. The win that you shared or the thing that you're most proud of, the teamwork thing, you can't put a price on teamwork in farming because I've said this before and I'll say it all the time. Like, you can be real mad at your boss at the end of the day of work, but when you have to go sit at a kitchen table with them and stare at them, it can
With
be,
your boss.
yeah, with your boss looking right back at you. So being able to work as a team is always just, that's the dream, right? Is to be able to work
Yeah,
as a team.
I do. Yep, I agree. That's the dream. And also, you have to have communication is not easy. Like even with your spouse, it is not easy, and especially when you do work side by side in so many different facets. But just being able to get it out there, even if it's sometimes I will literally just word vomit at him, and it's just like I feel so much better. Like it's been built up for a while, but at least it's out and it's done. But just that, and I know there's not. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I'm sure there are couples or scenarios and situations where, the communication is not that great and the teamwork is not that great. And everybody's scenarios are different. But like I said, that is a win for us. And I'm very, very fortunate that we are able to work together like that in the capacity that we do.
Absolutely. So you had mentioned, diversification being really key and pivotal to your operation. You've diversified a little bit in an own venture of yours. So tell us about 1673 Farm Co.
1673 Farm Co. Yeah, that's my little baby. I hand pour candles. And how that started was, so we have a really big event in our area in Mount Pleasant that's called Midwest Old Threshers. And it's like a threshing reunion, but we have vendors, and up on the square is a big market that people come in and, they sell everything from t-shirts to aprons to, you know, jellies or sauces or just, there's a whole gamut of things that people do. My mother-in-law has a booth on the square, and we have it's just a wide variety of artisans. So my sister-in-law does pottery. Like she makes her own pottery and she has that in there. My mother-in-law makes aprons. We have somebody that does metal, and there's just different things. And I like photography. So I had tried putting pictures in there, and it's just it just didn't feel it. And I don't know how it came out. Somebody's like, well, what about a candle? Like, oh yeah, that would kind of be fun to do. And I'm like, well, it'd be a good way if I'll do it if I can figure out how to tie it back to agriculture. So I was doing my research, and you can actually get soy-based wax. So the only wax I use is 100% soy-based, with most of it being grown. All of it's grown in the United States. I don't know the percentage, but a big chunk of it is grown right here in the Midwest, and it all comes out of a distributor in Iowa. So that was kind of the icing on the cake for me too. It's like, okay, not only am I supporting the ag industry, but I'm also supporting our local soybean commodity here in Iowa. So I do that, and they're anywhere from, 4-ounce jars to a 12 or 15-ounce ceramic jar, and I just pour different scents. And this last batch I did, which I don't have them on my website and I need to get that updated. I put a Bible verse on it, and I just really like the look and the feel of it. And a lot of people who got that one really liked it. And it's just, I don't know, any way I can give back or support the ag industry that supports so many people, this whole entire world, is a plus and a win in my book.
Absolutely. And I think it's so neat that you are able to source, the soy from the soybeans that you and your neighbors grow in the Midwest and in the US. What has been the reaction from your community, from your candles?
I would say for the most part, people are, so I'm not, my marketing is not very strong. Marketing is not my strong suit. So a lot of people have been like, "Oh, I didn't know you poured candles." But once they get them, then they're like, "Oh, we really like these. That's great." But the nationwide support for that, especially with it being agriculture based, has been phenomenal.
Yeah. If it makes you feel any better, Rachel, there are people not only in my personal vicinity, but also on the internet who've said, "Oh, I didn't know you do a podcast." So just so you feel a little bit better about your marketing.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, I sit there and I go, I don't really want to have to try to make myself have like 50,000 followers to be able to drive like people to my website. I figured if they're going to find it, they'll find it. If they're supposed to find it, they'll find it.
You know, when I think about, being an entrepreneur, because that's what we are. We're two entrepreneurs sitting here, whether it is you are marketing a candle that you've poured, or you're marketing beef that you've raised, if you are marketing the soybeans that you grew, or for me, a podcast, or goats, or hemp, or whatever it is, right? You have so many hats in this entrepreneurship that you are supposed to wear. And marketing is, pretty important. But at the end of the day, if all of those other things aren't done, you have nothing to market. So
that's right. You have nothing to market.
Yeah, I like what you said. Like if you're supposed to find it, you will. And, for me, in myself, anytime I hear from somebody or get a message from somebody saying, "I just found your podcast," I am just as excited today to hear that as I was 5 years ago when I launched, because for me, I did this selfishly for myself. And maybe for you, for the candles, it was a creative outlet for you.
It was. That's exactly what it was a creative outlet. And the part that probably gets to me the most, like in a good way, is when my 5-year-old daughter goes, "Mommy, I really love doing that with you." Like she just, she'll stand downstairs and she'll just watch me. She doesn't necessarily like mix or touch any other things because it's pretty hot and it's just, I want her just to learn. But she goes, "We made those candles together." Like, yeah, we did make those candles together. And just that she wants to keep being involved with that and having that spirit and that drive it's hard. It's really hard to describe, especially as a mom and watching, your kids want to follow in your footsteps. It's a pretty good feeling.
So if there's somebody listening today who has maybe thought about making a candle, or if they've thought about starting a podcast or doing really anything, if they have a dream of doing something and putting it out there and that being their creative outlet, what advice do you have for them?
Follow your heart, follow your dream. Like I'm a firm believer in God talking to you and using you, like your voice and your heart, to convey messages and where you're supposed to be. Whether me sitting here talking to you is going to spark someone's listening and go, yeah, I really have wanted to start a podcast, or I have wanted to take this creative outlet that I really enjoy doing and actually, expose other people to it. If it's on your heart and you can't shake it, go for it.
Right.
Just make sure it's not gonna, I wanted to make sure it wasn't gonna, like, you don't want it to be detrimental to you, like, in any way, whether it's mental health, physical health, financial health, family, whatever. Just, make sure that's all going to be okay. But yeah, take a risk. You're not going to know until you take that risk. Sometimes that's putting one toe in. Sometimes that's jumping head first in, but just follow your heart and go for it.
Absolutely. And if I can add to that, if it doesn't work out, that's okay. Try something else. If we tie it back to the diversification of your farming operation, if you try something and it works for a while and then it doesn't anymore, that's okay to pivot and to try something else, right? Like that is what entrepreneurship is.
Right. And to me, that's a big part of growth.
Yes.
Not only personally, but in business and entrepreneurship, you learn what works, you learn what doesn't. And that's the whole thing with pivoting is you can, as long as you don't let it stop you from and like completely shut you down, you're like, hey, yeah, this didn't work. So we're just gonna go a different direction with it and see what happens. But yeah, that's the beauty of it is pivoting goes both ways, good and bad. You can step back or you can keep moving forward.
Absolutely. Rachel, what is next for you? What are the hopes and dreams and goals for the farm, the candles, all of the things?
Keep moving forward with it, keep going, diversifying. We're not going to make our kids farm, but like if they want to, our end goal, like my husband and I, is we want to create a legacy for our kids. I want them to have something that they can look forward to coming back to, look forward that they can, okay, yeah, we want to do, Dad, I want to try this. Hey, here, we can hopefully be that point, that position that we can help them get started, guide them in that direction that they need to go or that they're wanting to go. But just, we want to make this multi-generational and just kids to learn, like, it's okay to fail. Just don't let it stop you. Just keep moving forward no matter what. Like you're going to have good points, you're going to have bad points, but just, follow your heart and follow your dreams and just go for it.
Absolutely. That's what legacy is, right? And when I think of agriculture, that is one of the words that comes to the top of mind is the legacy behind it. And good, bad, or otherwise, you're building a legacy.
That's right. And it's got, like I said, it starts somewhere and you just hope it doesn't end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rachel, my last question for you is what is the most rewarding part about being a rural woman for you?
Sharing my story. I know when I first started, like nobody's gonna, and I still like to this day kind of think that like, yeah, I'm not as big as like, some of the other people, but everybody has a story. And everybody's story matters. And this industry it's really important that we can come together and utilize our voices to share our legacies, to share our operations, to share what we do, to show that, we need agriculture. Without agriculture, this world will not survive.
Absolutely. And I love that the sharing the story piece is so valuable to you because it is valuable not only to you, but it's valuable to others. Like we said before, it might not get to the masses, but somehow, some way it gets to the people that need to hear it. So thank you for sharing your story with us today. And I know it's going to get to the people that need to hear it. So some way or the other.
Some way or the other.
My marketing skills aren't super great, but they're not bad. Rachel, for the folks who would like to connect with you after the show, where can they find you online?
I'm mostly on Instagram. My handle is rachel.yaley, and that's RACHEL.YALEY. And then I also do have one for the candles, and that's just at 1673 Farm Co.
And I will link both of those in the show notes so people can find you and connect with you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you again so much for sharing your story. I truly appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer, and admin support from Kim & Co. Online. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre and Carrie Munven from Laystone Farms. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story. Did you know that you can get this same great episode of the Rural Woman Podcast ad-free? I get it. Listening to ads during a podcast isn't always my favorite either. But in order to keep the lights and coffee pot on here at the Rural Woman Podcast Studios, they are necessary. I am so grateful to each and every one of my sponsors, but if you yourself would like to skip the ads while supporting the show, consider joining me over on Patreon. Patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast get ad-free episodes starting at Tier 5 on their podcast player of choice each week, plus some other great benefits. Find out more by heading to the link in today's show notes to learn how you can become a patron through Patreon.